Enter the bowl of vastness that is the heart, and listen to the song that is always resonating. Give yourself to it with total abandon. Quiet ecstasy is here, and a steady, regal sense of resting in the perfect spot.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Sam Sebastian, and you're listening to How Are You Doing Really? In today's episode, I am joined by my friend Caity Reilly. She's a human committed to being in her heart and in integrity, as she put it. This conversation is just full of, in my opinion, teachings and it's really honest, open conversation. She shares a bit about her process this year and how work had originally been planned out for over a year and everything had to change, like many others in this world have experienced. But in this great pause, she's been speaking about this process of going through the heroine's journey, which is the female archetypal journey that Carl Jung speaks to, and how she's being in the descending part of the journey. So kind of coming to this deeper level of integrity for herself, and just kind of looking at how a lot of what she was doing before, there was a performance aspect and kind of being a certain role, being put on a pedestal as a teacher and kind of putting herself in a box. So I'm really honored to have had this opportunity to speak with her, and excited for all of you to hear about her process and some of the teachings that she shares with all of us in this episode. Well, welcome everyone. I'm joined today with my friend Caity Reilly, and I usually introduce people in a way that kind of shares a little bit about them, and I'm just feeling compelled to have you introduce yourself, because I think you can put it into words a little more concisely.
I hope so. I'm finding myself really struggling these days with like putting language to like whatever it is that I'm doing in the world. But I think the best summary is like, I'm a human that's really committed to being in my heart and to honesty and connection, which feels really aligned with what this is. When you extended the invitation, I was like, oh, honest conversations. Like, yeah, that's all I want to be having today. And kind of always recently. So yeah, I could tell you other things about what I do, but that feels right.
I love that. Yeah, no, I really, that resonates with me. And I would say, yeah, it's a unique way of putting into words what it is that you do. And I think also, for myself, I really like that, because it's interesting in our society, in our culture, like asking people what they do for work is such a, I don't know, there's a bit of a charge to it. And it's like, oh, I have to sound a certain way and it has to encompass all these things. And and especially with the work that you do and the work that I'm doing, I feel like it's kind of hard to encapsulate, because it's just so many different modalities and practices. So
yeah, totally. And I feel like, I don't know if you resonate with this experience, but once I start to put on like the label of what I do, especially given that like my work oftentimes is in the realms of like sexuality or tantra or the heart, like the projections just come in so quickly, and before you know it, you are like in this box of what those words mean to you, but also what those words trigger in another person versus actually just meeting. I'm much more interested in just meeting someone and being in the space with them, and then seeing like, okay, there's a million different things in my toolbox as a healer and practitioner and all of that, but can we just actually be with each other versus all these like identities and who you want me to be and who you think I am and vice versa.
I think about like, I was talking to a couple here that I met through my friend, and they're both retired and they're both therapists. And they were just talking about the practices that they had before retirement, and we were talking about how like the modalities really help inform the work that we do, but it comes down to the relationship that we have with our clients, and that's really what it's about, is like being able to meet people and be with them in a way where they feel safe, where they feel comfortable, they can open up. And I think that's truly where all of the magic happens.
100%. It's totally in that safety and connection. And I think like the honesty contributes to that, to just that willingness to hold, like, this is about the relationship, not necessarily what I can do for you, but us actually connecting.
Totally. I like to just ask people how they're doing really in relation to what's happening currently in the world. And I know we've talked a little bit here and there, but I haven't heard much of what's been happening in your life since COVID started, and all of the other things that are on top of that, personally for you, and then just within the world.
Yeah. I want to take a second and see how I can like answer that without going into like storytelling, but actually like what has been going on, because it's very hard to put into words. Do you know Carl Jung's like the hero's journey, the archetypal hero's journey? And then there's like the heroine's journey, which is like kind of the archetypal feminine journey, which doesn't necessarily have to be like for men and for women. It's just like an outward quest versus an inward quest. So I feel like I've been on that, and I feel like I've been in the descending. And it's really interesting because like my life before COVID started was like planned out like a year, like in advance. Like there were so many things, like so many different teaching gigs and offerings and retreats and like big things happening in the business that I was running with my former partner, Matt. And that was amazing. That was really exciting. And what I've come to kind of like understand through all of that stopping, through our separation, through this crazy quest I've been on, is like how much for me I was using my archetypal kind of like feminine energy or my heart or who I am in these very like compartmentalized ways. And where all of that doing, even though it was like beautiful work and exciting work and like really lit me up, like I've been on this descent down into like what is the deepest level of integrity for me. And it's been this huge pulling apart of like performance and having to be a role and having to show up in a certain way and having to deal with like being put on pedestals or what it is to be the person in the front of the room, and having the space to, I mean, literally have all of that stop, right? Like just come to a halt, and to really like sit and reflect and strip away and be like, who am I if I'm not, I don't even want to call it working, but like doing my job.
Yeah.
Like who am I outside of these identities, and like what is the thing I'm actually in service to? And so it's been crazy. Am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Totally.
Okay, yeah. Cool. I feel like it's been fucking crazy. I'm from the East Coast, and like to me, like F-bombs are like a sacred thing. Like it's like punctuation. It's like necessary sometimes. So
yes, use it.
Okay, cool. That's really more real for me. But it's been this like just incredible process of being stripped bare. It's been like horrible at different parts of it. It's been like so painful and like so much grief and so much fear and like old nervous system patterns popping. And I feel like I went through this like really tiny birth canal the first like couple weeks there and got squeezed out into this space. And I've been in this space of kind of undoing and discovering and just really getting back to what feels like my roots in personal integrity, and allowing a lot more of me to be present. in like all of my relationships and anything I'm teaching. And just really serving that bigger piece, which it's like, at the end of the day, it's like I love my work in sexuality and I love my work in tantra and I love trauma healing and all of that. But it's actually just being, for me, about being in service to like life and love. And there's some like very feminine qualities for me archetypally that comes through.
Mm-hmm.
So I've loved it, even in the horrible parts. I'm like very grateful, and I can recognize I've had a very safe and privileged experience during the pandemic and during this time. And I don't know what else would have gotten me to stop quite like this.
Yeah, I think of it as
Right?
like the great pause.
Yeah, it totally is. Like 100%. And there's this point in the journey on like the heroine's journey, like kind of that they lay out where it's like, you're having success in this like imbalanced, like masculine way, like, right, like you're doing your work in the world, but it's coming from this place of like performance and doing. And then there's this great interruption that causes you to go down into the actual like bottoming out descent process. And I feel like that's what COVID's been for me. It's like nothing else. Like I was so determined to like keep things going and had no space for it to stop. And then this happened, and the stopping's been the best. I mean,
a gift.
It's been a gift. Yeah. Right. Yeah, totally.
And I think about like having the resources that you have, you know, and being able to still pay for the things that you need to pay for, get your food, and like all of these things. And that's really allowed for, in my own experience, I've had a similar experience where I've just had a lot of time to slow down and fortunately have been able to get by without doing in-person work. And it's just been such a like eye-opening kind of just full of awarenesses, like and in ways that I wasn't expecting. And one of the things that came from this process was starting this podcast. You know, I think there was a part of me that always wanted to make the leap and just do it. And I also was just holding myself back in so many ways. And I'm curious if you had any similar experiences and what maybe some of those things were that you found yourself stepping into that you maybe hadn't before.
Yeah. I totally have a dream to do a podcast too. So I've loved watching you do this. I'm like, oh, it's so awesome. Like to make the transition from like hands-on healing work to that, it's big. So I'm giving you big kudos and I'm super inspired by it.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. For me, I think the really big thing has been tuning in more to my writing. So I've always loved writing, and I don't know if I'd consider myself a writer, like whatever that box means, but I do a lot of writing, and it's opened up so much for that. And I have in my phone and my notes, which is probably a terrible place to store my writing, like on your cell phone, but like probably like 100 different pieces that have just come through during this time. And the space has really allowed for that kind of inner voice to come out. And then my work's really shifted. I was all in person, all hands-on for the last like 2+ years. And it's allowed my work to evolve. So I'm starting to work more with one-on-one clients, and I'm leaving room to birth like a bigger thing. And what I've loved about the work shifting to being virtual is like nobody's giving away their power when they get on the table. I don't know if you have that experience. Like people come in, they're like, make me feel better,
Yeah.
And as a healer, you're like, yeah, I can do that. Like, and that's kind of my job, and as much as you can empower them and be like, this is an experience generated by you and the work only goes as deep as you allow. At the end of the day, it's a power dynamic. It's a bit of a power dynamic. And so being able to do this work that I'm doing now, which I call Love's Embrace, which is really influenced by my Tantra teachers, Kobe Kozowski and Loren Rosche, and then my open heart teacher, Adam Gainsberg. I just get to be me. I get to like drop into this space that I love of just like honesty in the heart, and then sit with somebody else. And I'm still holding, and there is kind of a little bit of a role in that, but it's just like the work is completely generated by this like co-created field of sitting with someone and talking and doing statements and being committed to honesty. And that feels so good. I'm kind of like, I miss touching bodies because that's like such a joy and a love of mine. And my hands are like, oh, please let me work with someone. But this space that's opened up, and the kind of, to me, integrity of the work in that, it's so profound. I'm like, I don't know that I'm going to go back. Or if I did do hands-on work with people, it might not be until months into after doing session work or something. Like I've really let that go. And that's been huge and surprising. It's something I totally railed against for the first couple months of shelter in place.
It sounds like it's really empowering your clients to like use their own like wisdom, their own abilities to heal themselves, to really surface and come out and come through.
Yeah, totally. I always held in my sessions like that it's about empowerment and all these things, and that's very true. And there's just something about this shift, and somebody sitting in their space and their experience, and me sitting in mine, and while I can offer them nervous system tools or support them energetically or emotionally, like you're in your own space, you're in your own bubble. And so you have to sit with you. And I think that experience of sitting with you through the discomfort and not being rescued by like a regulating touch or me going in and doing something emotionally, like it's really profound. And for me, it's like helps us to face down. Like having to be in my own aloneness during this period of time has been like probably the number one most profound, empowering, healing experiences for me personally. And then to get to hold that, like, what is it to be in connection and be with our also aloneness? Like that paradox that comes out in the work is just, it's blowing my mind. I don't have a lot of words for it.
Yeah. And ironically, I was going to ask you to speak more to that process. But I can also just, I imagine it's like what you've already mentioned, sitting with your own discomfort, sitting with the different parts of yourself that maybe you haven't given space or time to really like be with, and find a way to have a healthier relationship with those parts of yourself.
Yeah. Can I tell a little story?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm laughing because it involves an IKEA dresser. So I had the experience. I'm really bad with time generally, and then during pandemic, I'm like, I have lost all track of the linear time. It was very shaky for me to begin with, and then this has really blown it up. But I guess it was maybe like a couple months ago. I don't entirely know how to describe this experience, but it was like a Tuesday night. I'm like an absolute hot mess, going through grieving my separation and just life. And I have clean laundry all over my floor that I'm working on putting away. And out of nowhere, it's just like, I can describe it as nothing else than like my heart opened, and I literally had to sit on the floor amongst all my clean laundry, and I was staring at my IKEA dresser in this one drawer, which I can see right now. Like I couldn't move from it. And I had the experience of like, it was the capacity to stay with me with my heart opening and looking at all of the deepest fear of being alone. And this is going to sound like all of this sounds probably a little dramatic, but just to add a layer of drama to it. The thing that really got me, that I really opened my heart in this experience, was like the feeling like I was dying, which I knew I wasn't, I wasn't actually dying, but it was like this gateway of if this, it felt like the kind of veil, right? Like time expanded, everything just in that liminal space. And there was this sense of oh, my next breath is not guaranteed. And so it was sitting with myself and choosing to stay for the fear, looking at all of my relations, looking at, where fear drives my relationships with family, where fear of being alone drove my last partnership, where I've used connection and other people, and where I'll shapeshift myself, and where I'll reach out to get out of this. I think it's really, frankly, common human experience of the discomfort of our aloneness. And we come in so intimately, interwoven with another human, but at the end of the day, we are alone in our experience, and we're going out with our last breath by ourselves, profoundly connected to everyone else and in our lives. And it was holding this paradox of how absolutely precious and how much humans break open my heart, and how that is the most important thing in the world. And then this experience of, and can I be with me? Because I was no one's around. I can't call anybody to rescue me right now. And I'm not going to call in my spiritual tools and guides. And I'm not going to leave this experience. I'm just going to stay afraid and alone and honest. And it just bottomed out into this profound experience of love, and just being oh, being human is all about love and all about our interdependence. And it's not some crazy, beautiful spiritual thing. I mean, it can be, but it's actually really simple. And I couldn't look away from that IKEA drawer the whole time. I at one point tried to turn and look at my altar, and I was all of these statues and beautiful things are totally irrelevant. This IKEA drawer, that's fucking real. This experience in my heart, that's real. It's so human, that middle drawer in my dresser.
Wow. Who knew?
Who knew? I gotta write the IKEA makers, be this dresser, total piece of shit in terms of its stability, but really the simple design opened my heart profoundly.
And going through the breakup.
Oh yeah, grief is amazing for opening your heart. That'll do it. Yeah.
And it's I think about going through various grief processes, and for me this year there's been a couple of pretty big ones, and I imagine for you as well. And it's, sometimes it just kind of hits, and I'm in this place where I'm oh my God, it's so heavy, and it's a lot to feel, and I don't even and at times I'm not even able to name it. I just am in this experience of just where is my sense of security and groundedness and connection to myself and to others, and in a really just integrated way. And I was telling you earlier before we got on that I went camping by myself in Joshua Tree. And, there was a lot of nervousness, and there was also a lot of excitement. I've done one other solo camping trip, and that was for my birthday last year. And I just was I want to do this. There's this longing for this experience. And before I even went, I looked up just what was going on Joshua Tree, and one of the things was there's a lot of bees out there right now, and they're swarming cars typically, just because they're searching for water. So some of the campgrounds were closed. That was in the back of my mind. So that kind of added a little bit of nervousness going into it. And then the first campground that I went into to kind of just see if this is where I wanted to camp, like nobody else was there. And I was like, wow, I'm not ready to be like completely like by myself away from others in this place. So I went to another one, and it happened to be like the perfect location. There were a couple of bees, but I had gotten there like right before sunset, and once sunset, the bees kind of went to sleep. So yeah, that process of kind of sitting in the discomfort of being alone, and then coming to this like realization that I'm not necessarily alone. Like there's like all these living things surrounding me, and I'm connected to that. And I really like, I was in so much awe of the beauty of nature there, and looking up at the sky for hours and just laying there and feeling so safe and so held by nature.
Yes. I love just that.
Like, whoa.
Yeah, right? Like when we're willing, it's just God, the intimacy with life that's like always there, right? Through nature, through other people, through the bees, like through the stars. And it for me, it's like this paradox of where I need to be able to anchor and hold myself and like be okay with being alone, so that I'm not using connection to get out of discomfort or feelings or whatever, but also like how I never am, right? Whether it's because like love is holding me, or the trees or the stars, or like another human in a conversation. And I don't know if you've had this experience. I'm going through this of like, in connecting so deeply with others and like with like life, I have the most heart expanding and like heartbreaking experiences where it's like, when I'm going into connection now with other people in particular, I'm receiving so much more from it than I ever have. Like I feel like I'm like actually getting the nutrients out of it and being like, oh my God, like my friends have always been loving me this much, or like people are just like, just the awe of what happens in connection. And then when I leave the connection, it's like it makes me even more aware of the like aloneness and longing, and then like I'm back in connection and belongings, and it's like this almost like figure 8 dance. It's like through the connection I feel the depth of my longing and the depth of my aloneness, and then the depth of my not aloneness. Like that's
I imagine
I'm
like
really into paradox. Like literally like a figure 8.
As you're moving your hands in figure 8, or even like the infinity symbol.
Exactly.
Well.
It's just both. Yeah.
That's a really beautiful way to think of it, and to just come to that realization. I know that you had mentioned studying under Loren, and
do you know Loren?
I met him actually when I was at him and Camille, right?
Yes. Oh my God, you've met both of them. Wait, you have to tell me like, what was your? Can you do a Loren Rosche impression? Like, what was your? Because everybody has it. Loren's been in my life for years. He's like a dear friend as well as my teacher, and he's a trip.
So this was I'll tell you my experience of meeting them, and then our interaction afterwards. But I don't have an impersonation, so
you got to hang out with him a little bit to be able to get. I'll give you a little Loren Rosche in a minute.
Okay. I was down at the baths at Esalen, and I think I just had like the afternoon off, so I was reading a book in one of the like single tubs, and I noticed him and Camille, and I loved watching the way that they interacted with each other. It was just like so sweet and so loving, and they both had just huge smiles. A lot of people coming to Esalen and like getting in the baths for the first time after being away, like there's just like this joy that comes with it. And Like I was seeing that, I think, and then also just the love like between them, and
That's so incredible.
I was kind of like struck by it. I was like, wow. And he was just had the biggest smile, you know, when he saw me, he had a huge smile and was just smiling at me. We didn't interact down there at the baths, but I was back up at the lodge and like by the bread bar, and both of them came in and they introduced themselves and just were like, hey, you were down reading that really big book down at the baths. And I'm like, yeah, I was. I had no idea he was there they were there to teach the workshop, and they were doing a teaching on the Radiance Sutras.
When was this, by the way? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was in, I think it was in February.
Okay, it was this year. Yeah. Okay, cool. Because I was like, maybe you were there when I was at Esalen for the first time.
I think I would have remembered. I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah, this was recently. So that was my experience of them. They were both really sweet. Asked me like what I was up to there, and I don't think they even mentioned what they were there for, but I put it together when I they did a Wednesday night presentation, and so that's how I was like, oh, okay, kind of put it together.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like looking at the Radiance Sutras. My copy of it is like, it's very old. It has plants in it actually from Esalen that I picked the first time I was there. Still, yeah. And that's actually, it's kind of crazy. I went to Esalen over 2 years ago, almost probably 3 years ago, and I didn't know I was going to move to the Bay Area, and going to Esalen to study with Loren. And I'd studied with Loren on the East Coast before. I've studied with him for quite a number of years. It wound up like completely changing my life and routing me to living in the Bay Area, and I had no clue. I got the cosmic 2x4. And Loren helped put me together. Oh yeah. That's a much longer story. But Loren Rosche has completely changed my life. I have never met another human like him. I consider him to be like a fully enlightened being. And my experience with Loren Rosche is that he's literally always tripping out on life. He's just like, life's a cosmic party, man. Like, get on and ride the waves, like a prana shakti. And like, he's the most fascinating human to study with, because he's just completely himself. And he's so in love with the text, the Bhairava Tantra, that he wrote the translation of, the interpretation of the Radiance Sutras. He's been studying it for something like 30 plus years. And then he's so in love with his wife, his partner, Camille. And I've never met a human with such just devotion, like streaming through him as a current. And also, I've never met someone that is like, I don't know if it's because I'm from the East Coast, but like more Californian in my entire life. And I say that like as the highest compliment. Like the man was literally gestated on like a surfboard. Like his parents were like these like California like he grew up like on the beach surfing every day. Like he's a fascinating human. I feel so lucky to have him as a part of my life, and to have had the gift of studying with him. And I'm really hoping to see them in person again soon. Hopefully at Esalen in the baths.
Yeah, I can tell that they've definitely impacted you in a huge way.
Sutra 26 has completely changed my life.
Can you share that? Do you mind?
Oh, I have it memorized. Yeah, you want it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it starts off, the one who is a play everywhere says, there's a space in the heart where everything meets. Come here if you want to find me. Mind, senses, soul, eternity is here. Are you here? Enter the bowl of vastness that is the heart, and listen to the song that is always resonating. Give yourself to it with total abandon. Quiet ecstasy is here, and a steady, regal sense of resting in the perfect spot. You who are the embodiment of blessing, once you know the way, the nature of attention will call you to return. again and again answer the call and be saturated with knowing that I belong here. I am at home. Yeah.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So my teacher Kobe read that sutra probably like 7 or 8 years ago in this training I wound up in with her. This is like before I'd been like practicing yoga, but this is before I kind of like got on the spiritual path, whatever that means. And the experience I had was like that sutra. I think I just instantly started crying, which is very common for me now. Just cry all the time. But it was like it leapt into my heart, and I would just like hear it. Like it would literally be like that. Listen to the song that is always resonating, and like I cannot put it into words or describe it, but like it is like it has lived inside of me and been my teacher. And one of the things that Loren writes about in the sutras, and actually he writes about it from his perspective, but it's also a part of the translation of the text, is Bhairava, the masculine consciousness. At one point says as he's giving the teachings, like even just one of these sutras, like allowing it to change your life can be the entire practice. And I'm like, oh, like, and it continues to. And Sutra 26 it's how I met Matt, like literally, like we sat down and had tea and started talking. And I was like, what's your favorite sutra? And he just goes, the one who's at play everywhere says. And I was like, oh, I just instantly fell in love. Yeah. And like, it's been a part of my work. It's like something I read to clients. It's often something I read in ceremony. And it just like, Loren tells these stories of being woken up at like 4 a.m. by the sutras, like calling to him. And he'll just like get up and write and move with them. And that's kind of what Sutra 26 has been for me. It's just like, it's like I can feel it like moving in my body. And it's completely changed my world. So I have nothing but the like deepest wellspring of gratitude for that man and that lineage. Yeah. And that text, and just like, oh, your life can be changed by a sutra, a poem, and not a poem, but like it's more than that. But yeah, and you never know what that thing is going to be.
You reminded me of what you shared earlier about like what that you've been writing, and my partner Finn, who he talks about like writing these glimmers that kind of come to him, and he'll write them in notes similar to you, like on his phone. And I'm curious, what are you finding yourself writing about? Is it the awarenesses you're having? Is it like pertaining specifically to your life? Is it about other things? All of the above?
Yeah. It's been really interesting because I've like channeled writing. So like I'll have like a voice or an energy come through that's distinctly not Caity Reilly, like that is like a bigger kind of voice. So there's some of that, and that's oftentimes where I write poetry from, or I write poetry from like my heart and erotic experiences. There's many flavors. And I've been finding myself in this dance, like the glimmers that I'm having is just this like direct experience of like, oh gosh, I need a better word than love. Like love's not a complete enough word. I'm like, come on, there's got to be more than 4 letters, but maybe on this planet, that's it. That's all we get. That's all we can name it as.
That's what it comes down to.
I know, it's so like, and I am not feeling as cheesy anymore. I've just embraced it, but I was like, come on, I gotta write about something other than love. But like my glimmers are the like totality of love, and like my heart breaking open, and love is consciousness. And in Tantra, we talk about prana shakti, which is life force, and specifically the feminine life force. And we talk about spanda, which is the sacred tremor, the animation of everything. It's kind of like our entropic nature, like how we like go away from this source and move in infinite directions. And I'm just writing a lot about that. but from like a more personal place.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm also really enjoying writing these kind of like confessionals of like sharing a little bit about my story, you know, and my journey, but also like what I'm humanly doing, like where I'm putting limits on love, where I'm scaring myself, where I'm shutting down, where I want to, you know, compartmentalize, like where I've used like love, like not love, but used relationship. Like I'm just really enjoying writing honestly, as well as like sharing these bigger awarenesses, because I think I've been writing the bigger awarenesses for a while, and this really human piece is just opening up something else. So it's a range. It's like poetry and kind of sort of like sutras, you know, and then it's just like what it is for me to be human and what I'm noticing myself doing, especially in the context of limiting love. It feels really fucking good.
And doing it with integrity, you know, like really being like honest and speaking your truth.
Yeah, you know, honesty for me, like naming what I'm doing is the most instant way to have connection and to be in my heart. Like honesty and not making it a problem. Like, you know, being like, oh, I'm not totally here right now, or I'm trying to limit love, or I'm doing this thing. And it's just like, just such a gateway to presence.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think about some of the struggles that I've had around just being honest with myself and being honest with others. And, you know, it really shows up in relationship.
Oh, yes, it does. Tell me more, Sam.
Yeah. And even like recently, while Finn has been away, and just being here on my own and finding myself like kind of going back into these patterns that would show up as a little kid, you know, like my parents would be away. I'd have the house to myself. So it's just like, oh, I'm going to do all these things. And you know, if I like am completely honest, like part of me really enjoys doing that. And I also realize that it can really be isolating. And if I don't talk about those experiences with Finn, you know, it kind of creates space between us, and it can be felt. And
yeah, it's all felt.
It's been, you know, really good in some ways to just go through this process. And I don't know how many more times I'm going to have to go through it in my life.
Probably
sure
a lot.
Plenty more.
Welcome to human Earth.
Yeah. And I'm really just grateful for that process, because I feel like it's a really big learning experience. And I'm recognizing where like certain things hold power in my life, and I'm choosing to give that power to those things. And I want to find a way to really just recognize that like that power's within me, and I don't have to give it to images or videos or other people. Like I can actually kind of harness that within myself. And I've done that, and I've done that with Finn, and it's just been profound and just brought us like a lot closer together.
Yeah, I love knowing that you all have honesty as a commitment in your relationship. Because like I think that's like a thing where like, oh yeah, I'm going to be honest in my relationship, which means I'm not going to like blatantly lie about stuff, but the honesty of sharing like what I'm doing, and like in that being willing to feel the impact it has on the connection. And I think the bigger piece, at least for me, when I'm sharing with that level of honesty, is I'm risking and willing to let myself be loved there. I'm also risking and willing to let myself be rejected there. But it really is just like this game of, for me, when I'm like doing things in secret, you know, like we call it self-sabotaging, or like, you know, running my stories or playing some game or putting myself in the box, is just like, oh, I'm just limiting love. Like and we have this saying in the open heart work where it's just like, I don't want to feel this. And like literally just catching how many times a day I'm like, oh, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that. Even like it when it's a good thing, like, or not a good thing, but like even when it's like love or connection, just like, nope, I don't want to feel that right now. And just being that honest about like how much or how little I'm available for connection. And the honesty is immediately more connection, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're risking letting yourself be loved for things that you've deemed unlovable or somebody else has deemed unlovable before. And that's the huge inner child healing, right? Like not having to do our stuff in secret, but actually just being like, oh, this is me and that's okay.
And having somebody to kind of hold you in that and be like, I'm not gonna push you away for that. Like I love you still and it's okay. Like thank you for sharing that with me. You know,
right? It's so good.
It is. I know that we're gonna wrap things up, but I like to ask just one final question.
Okay.
What's the biggest challenge you've been through this year?
This year. Oh.
Or really if there's something in the near past or throughout your life, whatever you feel compelled to share.
I think for me, it's been multiple things, right? How do I put it into words? Over and over, whether it's through trauma healing or grieving or the relationship separating or like COVID happening, just like life, being now recognizing that the challenge has been recognizing that I like actually have a choice about how I meet that and the story I make about me or not. And the challenge has been continuously like allowing like, oh, even if that is true, okay, oh, even if that deepest fear happens, oh, even if that relationship ends, oh, even if I can't work, like choosing to stay with me and be okay with me and not make a story and not close down my heart. And that's like been the challenge. And I've had like probably, a million little things in the past year and then some really big ones. Particularly like my relationship ending, being like, oh, because it triggered, right, like all the abandonment wounds and a million other stories, and being able to be with that and be like, and I'm okay, right? Like yes, I've never loved someone this deeply and had a partnership like this, and yes, that is ending. And in a sense, like leaving my life, right? And that's the grieving process. And like, oh, I'm still okay and I've got me after, very deeply for 2+ years having somebody who had me. And that choice point of like, okay, I'll literally like walk around and like rub my solar plexus and I'm like, and I keep saying this thing of like, love isn't leaving me and I'm not leaving me. And it's like been profound practice. I literally walk around on hikes, like rubbing my little solar plexus and belly and being like, if love isn't leaving me and I'm not going to leave me anymore, like I'm really committed to not abandoning myself in relationship and life. Like, what do you need? And oftentimes it's just that. And that's been like, I mean, I think I'm just going to continue to be faced with like a million different little challenges, but yeah, recognizing that and facing that down has been the biggest challenge and also like the biggest gift I've given to myself. Like love isn't leaving and I'm not leaving.
And you've found a way to kind of self-resource in those moments, like somatically, even like touching yourself and holding. And that's one of the spots where I just put my hand there, and
right. It's all the solar plexus.
And it's like, it's connected to my inner child. That's the area that I go to. So
yeah, me too. Me too. That. She hangs out in there. Big time.
Aw. Thank you so much for coming on and just sharing so much. And I wanted to, if people want to find out more about you and the work that you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, if you want to come be held by love, I don't know what else to describe my sessions as, and you want to be more honest than you ever have in your life, but it's gonna be great. The honesty is great. You can find me at serpentandrose.com, and my sessions are called Love's Embrace. I also just started a Facebook group, which I'm going to see how it goes, called Refuge, which is a place to be held by love. And I hold monthly online guided journeys. They're little like community gatherings where we get really honest. So there's like a bunch of prompts, and you get to confess where you limit love and hide from love and what it is to be human. And then you go and you dip into that kind of eternal space of being held. Yeah.
In a safe container that you
super safe container. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Sam. I love what you're up to, and thank you for bringing this into the world, because we need more honest conversations like this.
Yes.
Feels good.
Sending you a lot of love. Thank you again.
You too, Sam.
Thank you all so much for listening today. If any of you'd like to find out more about the work that I do, you can go to samsebastian.com. That's samsebastian.com. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show, please reach out to me via email. That's sam@samsebastian.com. Much love.